Hello and welcome. Today, Commvault's disaster recovery session is brought to you by Commvault and AWS. I'm Paul Lancaster. I'm sure you'll find this session very informative and take away some key business values that you can explore further into the future. And sorry, the slides have mucked up on myself and not a very good start. So we are pleased to have our data expert, Justin Mason, with us today. Justin is the Associate Director of Vendor and Operations for the University of Canberra. Justin will share his journey through the cloud and the leading benefits and lessons that have evolved in their cloud journey. We also have Christian Roeder from AWS and Bruce Duffy from our pre-sales team at Commvault, who has been very instrumental in what we've seen with dealing with our business with Canberra University. So today we'd really like you to get involved and make this as interactive as possible. You'll see there's a chat button on the screen. By all means, post your questions there. We also have from Amazon some gift cards for some great questions. So bear in mind, these are great value, being an exchange rate of $39 Australian and $41 for New Zealand. So yeah, it'd be great if you could put your questions forward. We also have 2 polling questions through the presentation. Great if you can get involved in those, and we'll show those results as we go through the presentation. So finally, let's get into the presentation, and would also be good to hear your feedback as to how we can better improve our presentations with this, but also get some good references to questions for the session. So let's move on to our evolving hybrid cloud world as we see it today. So today we're probably seeing the public cloud as one of the most disruptive and challenging forces impacting customers, I suppose, their applications, their infrastructure. This all requires new business models and new architecture decisions on how to move forward. As many of you would know, this also impacts, the decisions around specific solutions, and mainly those solutions for protection and management of the data in the public cloud. So Commvault realises this and utilises, the attributes of public cloud to enable basically a cost-effective, on-demand use cases for both data protection and data management. And this isn't only to the cloud, but also from the cloud. As you will hear later in today's presentation, the cloud resources, the bandwidth, their ability to often be localized by regional presence, allows an easy ramp up to the public cloud. We'll hear later on from Justin around, the cost implications as on the various ways you can do this, where it may be a pay-as-you-go model that just doesn't extend to only your production workloads, but also to the present changing and providing flexibility, being agile, yet capable of any type of recovery from your applications and data. So you'll see here basically our Commvault dashboard, for a better word. So this is basically a global view of what we see from a referenceable area. So when we look at this is probably less than 50% of our customer base. But as you can see, we are an industry leader across 2, being the Gartner and Forrester platforms. There's also areas here where you'll see that we are an engineering-led technology, supporting the developments of our customers' new workloads and the applications that we need to support. Through that, there's a great amount of engineering patents that are evolved out of this. I think you see the statistics here. We do have a strong customer mix of both hybrid and cloud segments, along with the growing areas across, the servers we protect and the VMs we also protect. Having said this, the cloud is a growth area, and to us, if we look at this 700 petabyte against the 11 exabytes, it's purely less than 7% of all data under management. So with Commvault as an extension to the cloud, today we see our alliance with AWS as very defining. We work very closely with them across the deliverables, and being that from engineering, go to market, and today, we are very customer focused on how we deliver our reference architectures, the platform design principles we use for cloud, how we actually utilize our architecture sizing, and our architecture considerations for the best customer outcomes. We also have a strong focus very much on the disaster recovery to the cloud. And also with this, we're fully mindful of how we protect and recover active workloads in AWS, and along with application migration. So there's a few areas here where we excel from a category perspective, and that's the movement of data to the cloud. This typically involves using a public cloud as an object storage, and for our sake, it's a target for backup and archiving of data. And other areas, managing data in and across clouds. So whether that be from AWS to AWS or other areas, we are basically protecting and lifecycling the data and instances in the cloud. And I suppose the final use case we see is the use of the data in the cloud. So utilizing the data that's stored in the public cloud for cases such as disaster recovery, dev testing, and other production and non-production cases. So with that, let's get on to our first poll. So I'll just bring up the poll now. 2 seconds. So thank you. So you'll see now on the poll is a few questions. So looking at cloud data protection, what's the main area of focus for your organisation? I'll give it another minute or so as the numbers come in very quickly. Just up to 68% votes. Let's give another 15 seconds. Just need a few more to come in. Can someone sway the poll? So I'll end it there. So some very interesting results from that perspective, and I'll share them on the screen. So we're seeing that backup recovery to the public cloud, 28%, backup recovery to existing cloud environments, 34%, and equally on the same percentage, the migration of data and applications to the cloud. Cloud to cloud support, very low, but I think this is something we can obviously discuss later on with Christian and hear what Justin has to say about it as well. So let me go back to my screen. So very, very good. So at this point in time, I'd like to introduce Justin, and for Justin to to take us through the context of where the uni is today, and where it's come from, particularly in regards not so much to the stats of the uni, but also to the regards of the technology. So over to you, Justin.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening in. Hopefully, I won't bore you too much. So I'm just going to quickly kick off with a little bit about the University of Canberra, I guess, to set some context of who we are. Based in the capital of Australia, in Canberra, for those international listeners. We're a relatively young university, only being about 30 years old, but despite being a pretty young university, we do have a few accolades to our name and are always trying to, I guess, improve our status on the world stage. We're ranked 34 in terms of world rankings amongst young universities. We're the fastest rising university in the world in terms of world rankings. We kind of pride ourselves, I guess, of making graduates job ready. So we've got one of the largest work integrated learning programs in Australia, and a large focus of the study at the university is to put students, I guess, in real workplaces to make them job ready, I guess, when they graduate. So that kind of gives us a quick overview of the university and who we are. And as we move on to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about our IT environment. So this is a quick snapshot of the IT environment at the university. We've got 2 data centers. We used to have 2 pretty, I guess, medium-sized data centers. We've actually decommissioned one of our larger data centers recently and replaced it with a micro data center for DR purposes. And that's mainly because of the consolidation we've done over the last few years with our infrastructure by moving to the Nutanix hyperconverged platform. So it's not because we've moved a substantial amount of workloads and so forth to the cloud, but even though we have done some of that, a lot of it's to do with, I guess, moving to the cloud using SaaS services, but also from heavily consolidating our on-premise, I guess, physical footprint. And we've downsized our data center footprint by about 70-80% since about 2013, and that's allowed us to shift one of our data centers down to a micro data center, which is basically only 3 racks of equipment for DR. Our larger data center is about 14 racks or so. As I mentioned before, we're primarily using Nutanix for virtualization. We're heavily virtualized, probably about 90% of workloads are virtualized. We're primarily running on the AHV, Acropolis hypervisor. We've got 400 odd databases that I guess support a lot of our applications and systems at the university. We mainly run on Oracle RAC and MS SQL as our chosen database platforms. We've across the board about 280 terabytes of data. That's a mixture of research data and corporate data and staff data, student data, etc. Like most organisations, we've got a vast range of applications that we host and support, from running in the cloud, SaaS, on-premise, obviously. Key applications, like most universities, HR, finance, student admin, student-facing services such as learning management system and lecture recording, with nearly almost all of those, if not all of them, being obviously protected by Commvault. We've got about 400 VMs running on premise on Nutanix. About around half of those 200 odd being protected by Commvault. Some of them, because they're just test and dev, don't need to be protected. So that gives us, that's kind of a quick rundown of what our IT environment looks like.
So I suppose from a customer perspective here, there's obviously been some strong growth in the databases and the IT environments that you've had over the years. How did you manage to start the discussions with Commvault, and you know, what were the challenges that you had in moving to the areas that I suppose you wanted to really define around, obviously, I suppose a DR side to start off with, and then you know, around data retention.
Yeah, very good question. So I guess this particular, our journey here covers two different time periods. So we had two different sets of challenges in two different time periods, which was 2014 and 2017 being the two different. So I guess what I was trying to explain, I guess, to people is, as I jump around, hopefully people can still follow that. In 2014, we particular had a challenge around DR, and then moving to 2017, we had a challenge around long-term retention. But if I start off in 2014, we had some challenges around, I guess, making our DR disaster recovery backups a bit more agile, a bit more robust, a bit more automated. At the time, the way we were doing DR is we had a few different, I guess, solutions in place, where one thing we had in place was we had some Commvault infrastructure in a different building at the university, and we were making replica copies of our backups to that infrastructure in a different building. The main downside to that was it wasn't true offsite. It was still located at the university, but it was in a different building. To kind of cover the offsite backup side of things, we started to create sets of backup tapes and store those with an offsite with a records company. So that was offsite, but the challenge around that was that it was a very manual process. So it would take about a week to make a full set of backup tapes. And then we'd have to get the records company to come in and book them in and pick it up and take it away and do the same thing when we wanted to swap them out with a new set. Because it was a pretty convoluted process, we're only doing that about once a quarter. So obviously the risk there from a business point of view was essentially the data, I guess, at any point in time could be 3 months out of date. So we came up to 2014. That's how we were kind of doing DR. Some of the DR infrastructure that I mentioned before in the other building, that was up for hardware refresh or replacement. It was getting pretty old. To replace it was going to cost a substantial amount of money. So I started to think, well, maybe there's a better way to do this. And I'd been hearing about Commvault's integration with cloud providers. So I reached out to our local Commvault rep, who's fantastic. And I guess started the conversation along the lines of, is this mature? Can we look at using it? Can you help us work out from a cost point of view whether it's going to be attractive? From a performance point of view, is it going to work? And as we started to start the conversation, we also, I guess the no-brainer decision at the time was AWS, because they had a data center in Sydney, which was true off-site, but close enough for us to have a really good connection between the university and the AWS data center in Sydney, both the university and that data center having a link onto the ARNet network. So we knew there that at least the infrastructure was in place to, in theory, have a fast connection between us. And as we started to kind of architect it out with Commvault and with AWS, we could definitely see that from a technical point of view, it was doable. It was just more than working out whether financially it would make sense and doing some testing around performance. And once we kind of crunched the numbers, financially, it definitely, it was coming out at the time about pretty even with what we could do on premise versus using the cloud option. And then once we moved into testing, to our surprise, the performance was absolutely amazing. So I was a bit of a skeptic. So the performance kind of blew me away and really surprised me at how good it was. And once we'd done the testing and thought, hey, this looks great, and from a risk mitigation point of view and a business reputational point of view, this really makes sense. And we decided with about 4 weeks of testing that we should go with this. And just before we were moving to production, AWS released some price cuts, so that made it even more attractive again. All of a sudden, it was now going to look cheaper than what we could do on premise. So yeah, fast forward 4 weeks later, and we'd cut over, and it was all running pretty well.
But bearing that in mind, what was the split between the research data and the standard, I suppose, the support/admin data?
It's a good question. I think we must be up around maybe 50, 60 odd terabytes of research data. So compared to some universities that may have petabytes of research data, we're definitely not in that stratosphere. We have a fairly good chunk, probably being around 50, 60 terabytes that's protected by Commvault. We have had a major project in the last few years because we had some research pockets in the university kind of having their data spread out in different areas, different infrastructure around the university. And we've been doing a lot of work to consolidate that into kind of central infrastructure, and also having it centrally protected by Commvault, and the university agreeing, well, having that data properly protected by something such as Commvault from an IP point of view, and protecting, critical research data like that is important. So that's still kind of an ongoing thing. So there might be more research data out there that's still yet to come into the fold, but I think we're pretty close.
Very good. So obviously there's a lot of data there and a lot of areas there to keep your business continuity plan moving ahead. So let's move on to the solution and how the solution evolved.
Yeah, well, I'll quickly it'll only take a minute. I'll touch on the challenges for the 2017 tape solution, because as I said, it was a kind of jumping around a bit, so sorry for that. So in 2017, when we were looking at it was similar to what we had with DR, and we had some infrastructure coming up for replacement, and that was being tape libraries. So at the time, tape libraries, like most people know, were pretty expensive. We'd been using AWS and Commvault for a number of years for just that DR purpose. And when we were using it for DR purpose, we were only storing the latest copy of the data in AWS to give us that real-time snapshot of our data should we need to recover in a disaster. In 2017, when we had the tape library infrastructure due for replacement, I started to think, again, that's pretty expensive. Is there something we can do with the cloud? The difference there being, well, we wouldn't just be storing a single set of our data at any one time in the cloud. We'd be restoring our data for long-term retention, so everything in an ongoing basis. And so the worry there was, is that going to be affordable? And at the time, or over the previous few years, Commvault had made, I think, great enhancements in using dedupe in the cloud. And so yet again, we started talking to Commvault and AWS, seeing what we could do by using deduplication. That was looking like, from a financial point of view, it was definitely going to be very attractive. And once we crunched the numbers, it was yet again looking like a more cost-effective solution than replacing the tape libraries. Performance-wise, it was looking to be even better, because of using dedupe, we're only going to be writing up the change data to the cloud, whereas with the DR solution back in 2014, we were copying up all the data, but that was only one set of data. So we'd write up the latest full, delete the previous full, but moving to 2017, we were going to put everything up there, but dedupe was really going to be the game changer there to make sure that the cost didn't blow out. So we looked at the architecture, we worked out the financials. We then engaged Commvault Professional Services, who really know their stuff, to come in and help us. We'd already had the foundation there set up with Commvault talking to AWS, and we just needed to make a few tweaks there to change us over to obviously long-term retention and using a dedupe database in the cloud and so forth. So that only actually took us, I think it was 2 days of Commvault on site, and we'd done what we needed to do and changed over, and it was all working pretty great. There was a few adjustments here and there on and getting the scheduling right, but that was no showstopper. And yeah, and then and that kind of yeah. And looking back now, yeah, it surprised me how easy it was to get that implemented.
Very good. So, I suppose the 2014 DR solution, did that give you more, I suppose, more up-to-date offsite copies of your data, and yeah, was that a cost saving to the university?
Yeah. Sorry, I just realised I jumped around a bit from solution to challenge, and yeah, in 2014, when we went to, so like you said, and what I mentioned, the main advantage with the 2014 DR solution was moving to the true offsite DR copies of your data, but also being real time. Like I said before, when we were doing the manual offsite with tapes, you could at any period of time be 3 months out of date. With 2014, having it, well, it's completely automated. So you've got your schedules and your aux copies set up in Commvault, and it was completely automated. As soon as a particular full for a data set would complete on site, it would then write that full up to AWS, and then would delete off the previous full. So the data was basically pretty much streamed there in real time, and the data was completely up to date in terms of when the last full finished. So probably from a BCP point of view and a risk mitigation point of view, it really started to meet a lot more of the risk mitigation factors that we were really looking for, in terms of if something did happen to the campus, we were able to get that data back.
Yeah. And I suppose moving in 2017 to the long-term retention solution, I mean, how did you utilise or did you utilise the different tiers of AWS storage for further cost savings?
Yeah, and originally when we were in 2014, we were just using S3. I think we were using S3 in frequent access at the time, and that was basically because the data was changing so much. But when we looked at 2017 and long-term retention, we were obviously then going to have a case of where data wouldn't be changing as much, because we'd have our first we'd set up our first copy, and then we would just write the changes. So initially what we went with was writing to S3 in frequent access, and after 365 days to 12 months, we would write it off to Glacier for further cost savings. I can briefly just touch on, so we had, that all worked pretty well. We had a couple of challenges, or not, a couple of challenges around restoring data from Glacier, and that wasn't that we couldn't get it back, it was just very time consuming. But yet again, to Commvault's credit, we've re-architected that a little bit recently, and our local rep here, who I should give a shout out to, was fantastic in helping us re-architect the way, depending on what type of data we'd split up between file system data, virtual server data, and databases, how we would tier that on Amazon, on AWS, depending on the data type, what storage tier we use, and like the recovery requirements we had. So we're now actually using a mixture of S3IA and Glacier Deep Archive. So yet again, I guess that highlights AWS continually to to make the cloud storage better value for money by releasing these new storage tiers all the time that are even cheaper. So being able to use Deep Archive is been helpful as well for even further cost savings. And that's really important when you're looking at long-term retention, because if you're looking at keeping your data up in the cloud for long periods of time, you really do need those different storage tiers to make it more viable.
Yeah. So I suppose taking that to another level, how has the uni petitioned the cloud data backup from the cloud data operational? So potentially don't have a breach, and it doesn't obviously make things vulnerable.
Yeah, so I guess we have, the way that we've set it up is we have very few users, I guess, as step one, who actually have privileged access to that data. So I guess releasing the footprint on who can get access to that data. The data is encrypted in transit to between the uni and AWS to make sure that, I guess, that it can't be intercepted as it's being copied up there. We obviously use AWS's security protocols around I think it's IAM and stuff like that, to make sure that so you make sure that when you've set up Commvault to write to the AWS bucket, it has access keys and security keys that it uses to talk to those buckets to make sure that they're locked down. Obviously, the buckets don't have public access turned on. So there's a lot of, which our AWS gurus can probably talk a bit more later about security, but there's a lot of stuff that's built in to make sure it's secure. But obviously with having partners like AWS and Commvault help you to double and triple check everything is important as well. Because there's really, obviously, once you move something like that to the public cloud, security is paramount. And as long as you have the right help and you double and triple check everything, then security shouldn't be an issue. Very
good. So let's move on. Let's move on to our second polling question. This should be the second one, but it's brought me back to the first one. And if I do this correctly, let's launch it, and everyone should see it now. Let's only give 30 seconds to this. I know it's a yes or no. Pretty straightforward, but very interested to see the results on this one. And as we thought, let's keep going. So it's very significant here that there's a different mechanism being used for long-term retention of tape. So much, 2/3 to 1/3 nearly. So exactly now. So that's very interesting. I'll just let it go another 10 seconds and we'll end that. So so very interesting that, but nothing that's probably we're seeing any different from the way our customers are talking to us, both around cloud and around our own technologies that we offer. So I'll end that poll, and the final figures at the end were 67 to 33, so 2/3 to 1/3. So let's move ahead. We talked about the solution and the challenges. Let's move ahead to basically see how we developed over the architectural side, Justin. And if you can just spend a short amount of time on the architecture here, then how you move the business forward.
Yeah, so this goes back to pre-2014, our original architecture, when we had we weren't using any cloud provider at all. So I guess like a pretty standard setup, we had servers and VMs that were backed up by Commvault media agents. As I said before, a DR copy went to a secondary storage location in a different building for DR, and then we were for off-site copies, we were, as I said before, we were writing off a set of tapes and then storing it on an off-site location with a records company. And then we were also, something I didn't mention before, but we were storing some of our tapes in two different locations on campus as well for a bit more kind of risk mitigation, I suppose, should one building go up in flames. So you could see there, it's, I guess, to me now, it looks a little bit convoluted, and you can see where there's definitely a few kinks in the chain in terms of things being a bit more complicated than they should. And obviously the step 4 of going to offsite storage was the real kind of the thing that was that was working to some extent, but was obviously a bit slow and the data could potentially be out of date.
So moving forward.
Yeah, so this shows what we're able to eliminate when we went to AWS with DR. So basically you can see there we were eliminating the 2 tape copies we were doing for DR, and we were also eliminating the need to store tapes offsite with the records management company. So that was from a resource point of view, not having to do those tape manually was obviously a big saving, not having to buy the tapes, not having to pay the management company to store the tapes and return the tapes, et cetera, et cetera. So we still had, for our long-term retention, we still had a tape library on campus, but we were able to, eliminate those additional copies and additional tape overhead and storing it off-site.
Yeah. So obviously this didn't happen overnight, and there must have been significant performance and testing done on this to get the solution correct.
Yeah, and I mean, it actually probably happened a lot quicker than I thought, because when we started the conversation with AWS and Commvault, I thought, oh, okay, start the conversation and see where we go. But things moved pretty quickly, as in the integration was there. It was already there with Commvault. AWS and Commvault were great in making the time to spend with us to work on it. And yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, from starting the conversation to cutting over to production was about a month. It ended up being pretty bulletproof, I think, because it was just it worked out of the box. And I guess we were fortunate too, because we, being an institution on the ARNet network and having that link to the AWS data center in Sydney, the performance was really good. So there wasn't really any performance hurdles along those lines that we had to kind of overcome. So yeah, it surprised me how quickly we were able to get up and running it. We found, I think, during the testing, we found one bug that we came across where when Commvault was pruning data off AWS, it thought it was pruning the data, but it wasn't. But that was, to Commvault and AWS's credit, like we found the bug pretty quickly, and they worked out pretty quickly what the problem was, and only took a week or so to release a fix. So so that, I guess, shows how responsive Commvault is to fixing bugs like that. And fast forward 4 weeks, and we were away we went and never looked back. So
I suppose the current backup architecture and what it looks like now compared to the original back in 2014 has changed significantly. Yeah,
and it looks really simple when you look at it like that. And but the thing is, even though it looks simple, we've lost no functionality. If anything, we've probably gained functionality. And the thing is, from a support overhead point of view, it's just it is phenomenal. You don't know until you go through something like this, until you kind of look back and how much time you spent supporting infrastructure on site and tapes and tape libraries breaking and having to buy more storage when you run out. Like, how much time, you don't realize how much time that consumes, because it's just part of your job until you don't have to do it anymore. And all of a sudden you've got time to focus on other things. So that's basically the architecture now, which is, servers to our media agents on site. And obviously we still have nearline storage on site, and then that just all farms off to AWS.
So with the farming off to AWS, and obviously after 365 days, you go to the Glacier platform. Is there any deduping done at the Glacier platform level?
Well, the data, Bruce might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but it's all deduped. So when we write it up into S3, it's deduped, and then it stays deduped when it then ages off, because the aging off is handled by AWS. So when that data chunk in AWS reaches the time period for the life cycle that you've set, it just ages it off to the next storage tier. So yeah, the data does stay.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. So when it comes to deduping in terms of Amazon tiers, I mean, you have to select the right tier for the right use case. I mean, we certainly can dedupe into all of them, but what we have for University of Canberra, we sort of have two schemes. So we have short-term retention, buckets for short-term retention, and then we have buckets for long-term retention. That's the stuff that's going to be kept monthly copies from, indefinitely. So for the short-term stuff, that goes into S3IA because that's a 30-day copy, and it's just a constantly churning pool, and you're always pruning. And that wouldn't be suitable in Glacier, because once something's in Glacier, you can't go around pruning and deleting things quickly and regularly. There's charges for that, but you also can't get to it immediately. So you have to be intelligent about the way you do it. So for the DR copy, for our 30-day daily kind of stuff, that's all going to S3IA, and that's deduping. That's a constant 30-day pool, and it's pruning and it's doing that kind of business. The long-term retention stuff, it goes to S3IA originally, but then it's life cycled down to Glacier for the long term. And we certainly dedupe on that, but because it's been kept forever, you're not constantly accessing it. You're not pruning, because you can't prune once it's down in Glacier. So you have to choose the right workload. But obviously, with if you're keeping monthly copies forever, there's a massive benefit to deduping that, because it's going to fold down very, very well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. So let's move on and let's look at the benefits that the uni and yourself, Justin, have learned out of this process, and maybe some of the lessons that you have learned through the process.
Yeah, no worries. So there's obviously there we've got some cost savings, and those cost savings were kind of modelled over, like our infrastructure life cycle is about 5 years, so we kind of modelled infrastructure replacement over 5 years versus using AWS over 5 years and not having to buy tapes and tape libraries, and so yeah, we came out well ahead from for a small university. That's a lot of money. For a lot of large companies, it might not be a lot of money, but I guess for us, that was deemed significant, I suppose. Having said that, to me, I think in the beginning, I was primarily focused on the financial savings, but then as we started to move over to these new solutions, and I started to realise the kind of support overhead that it removed, I started to think, that's probably as big a benefit, if not a bigger benefit, than the financial savings, because when you're able then to, I guess, have your support resources maybe focus on other things, there's cost savings there obviously as well. And like I touched on earlier, the amount of support overhead that it removed from people that support our backup environment, where they were able to focus on other things, or even focus on fine-tuning the backup environment even more and not fighting fires with broken tape libraries and firmware updates on storage and stuff. It did surprise me of the big difference that it made. We touched earlier before on when we did the 2014 DR solution, that obviously the major win there from a risk mitigation point of view was having those real-time copies of our data off-site when not having to do it manually, freeing up IT resources, which I touched on before, and when we went to the long-term data retention solution in 2017, what it mentions there is the agility, I guess, with being able to get the data back without having, and especially with this working from home COVID stuff, like if I need to get data back, I can do it all remotely. I don't have to go in and load tapes into a tape library in terms of to get data, like long-term data back from backups. And having it, and I guess the agility around using a cloud provider where it's kind of a a set and forget in terms of automatic growth. So not having to worry about, oh, have I got enough storage? Do I need to buy more storage? It just scales automatically, and all that work's taken away from you. Obviously, the danger there is, well, keep an eye on it and make sure that it's something untoward hasn't happened, and data blows out, because obviously there's cost implications there. Obviously, all this flows on to having better support experiences for users at the university across the board. If you're protecting all of your digital assets and able to recover a lot quickly should you need to, that's obviously an enhanced user experience for everyone. And something that, so we at the university, we have a portion of our IT that's outsourced to an Indian outsourced company, and obviously making their life easier as well in supporting Commvault has been something that they've been very receptive to and very happy with as well. So with a lot of outsourced IT, obviously you make changes to the environment, it can be a bit of a negotiation, and there might be some change in contract there. But with something like this, where we were making things even easier for them, there was obviously no friction there. That they could see the benefit, and there was no extra implications from them from a sport perspective, and they've been happy to support that new Commvault AWS model for a number of years now.
Very good. And from a management perspective, has that improved significantly, knowing that you can see the AWS platform from the Commvault platform from a bucket perspective? Yeah,
in terms of ease of management of the data.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, knowing that all your data's in that one pane of glass, and we've seen that when we've done other things like recently re-architected some of the way that the storage tiers and that works. It's just, from a management point of view, it just makes everything so much easier, because you're really just dealing with Commvault and AWS. So you've really just got two panes of glasses there, two different, technology stacks. You're not having to deal with another technology stack with a third-party tape library and a third-party storage vendor or something like that. So it's, having that simplified stack across the board is really beneficial as well.
Very good. So let's move on to the lessons learned from your perspective.
I think, as I touched on before, definitely testing is obviously important, and doing a pilot if you can. I think the main thing for us was getting the vendors in the same room talking, and it was awesome, because we've got Bruce here who's been a fantastic help over the years, and AWS are a great help as well. And there was no dramas in them coming together and talking to us, and nutting out things together, and that's what worked really well. And I think that was why we were able to get things happening so quickly. And with professional services from Commvault, obviously knowing everything back to front, and being able to come in and we know the product pretty well ourselves. We've been using it for about 10 years now, but having that peace of mind when you can have the experts come in and make sure everything's set up properly from a performance and security point of view really makes things a lot easier as well. Talk to other customers, and that's what I always try and do as well. If I can talk to other people that have done things that I'm looking into, and they can tell me the ins and outs and the gotchas, it definitely makes it a lot more easier. So you're not having to learn everything from the start yourself. Take a lot of the guesswork out of things. The architecting and the financial modeling is definitely important in this, and that was important for us to be able to, and that's what Commvault really helped us out a lot with, was doing some cost modeling around that we could then show our management that, hey, look, from a financial point of view, this is looking pretty compelling, and getting that right is important. Obviously, to make sure that there's no surprises down the track, and there'll be obviously a lot of questions I got, and I think there's already been some questions so far about, okay, you're going to use the public cloud for storing data. Prepare for, is it safe? And I think Christian from AWS can obviously talk a bit about this, but I think it's yes, it is safe, but it's also as safe as you make it. It's that shared, I guess, responsibility of making sure that every kink in the chain, I guess, is secure appropriately, whether it be the AWS point of view or the Commvault point of view. But everything is there to make it safe, and even mostly out of the box, it'll do a lot of the stuff. But that's, yeah, you've got to make sure that you double and triple check everything to make sure that it is safe.
Yeah. There's quite a few questions come through. A lot around the architecture side of things. Particularly, I mean, there's one coming around, do we use media agents to connect to the buckets in the cloud? Can you explain, the architecture side of things with?
Yeah, so we still have, when we first started down the road of using Commvault and AWS, we were still using on-premise media agents, definitely. You can run media agents in the cloud, and Bruce can probably touch on that. But because we do still have, the ability to run infrastructure on premise, it made sense for us to run the media agents on premise. But basically, those media agents on premise then just connect to AWS, pretty much like another storage library, just as you would connect to a storage library if you had infrastructure locally. And that's basically how simple it is. It's just like it touching another storage point. And then over the years, we've kind of evolved from using just Dell PowerEdge servers with Windows media agents. We're now just recently running Hyperscale, Commvault Hyperscale. And it was actually and that's another point to make, having most of our data and that in the cloud made it a lot easier to cut over to Hyperscale as well. But I think there's many different ways you can architect it. And I believe if you want to, you can definitely run your media agents in the cloud. We've been thinking about, do we put a media agent in the cloud for I guess a DR point of view as well? Because I guess, yes, we've got our data up there, and yes, we can get all the data back. But if something catastrophic happened, we would have to, I guess, spin up a media agent to just start restoring our data, which wouldn't take long. But if you had one there ready to go, you'd hit the ground running even quicker.
Yeah, brilliant. Hey, listen, don't you go away. There's a lot of questions come through, and I'd really like to bring Christian and Bruce into the conversation around some questions. Christian, there's a couple come through around security of data in the cloud. Can you give us some insight from an AWS perspective?
Yeah, certainly. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much, Paul. And it's been awesome hearing from Justin on those operational and performance benefits. So I guess around the security, it's a really well-trodden path to the answer, because we've seen hundreds of petabytes of data ingested from Commvault customers, and security is always our top priority at AWS. Customers improve their security posture by moving to the cloud, because instead of managing all their security aspects on their own, it now becomes a shared responsibility model. So AWS manages and controls all of the components, from the host operating systems, the virtualization, right down to the physical security of our highly available regions from where the services operate. So all of that burden's taken away from the customer, and they're really freed up to be responsible for building and securing their applications when they move to the cloud. Commvault specifically provides end-to-end encryption, and it's got integration with AWS security mechanisms, including identity and access management, along with our key management service. And that's integrated across all 6 storage classes of Amazon S3, including Glacier and Deep Archive. So all of those secure integrations have been jointly validated by our engineering teams together. And I think Justin touched on it earlier. So S3 buckets, they're secure by default upon creation. And when the users go into the console, it will highlight any publicly accessible buckets, and it will warn the users of any changes to your bucket policies or bucket access control lists that would make that bucket publicly accessible. So there's really comprehensive documentation that Commvault provide, along with professional services from yourselves, Commvault, and our joint partners. So I'd say in summary, it's inherently secure. When customers use AWS and Commvault for cloud backup and DR as well as cost effective, and we heard performance improvements, and it's pretty simple to get started.
Yeah, and I suppose while I've got you on the line, this is probably a question between yourself and Bruce. Comes in, can I use Commvault software to migrate to AWS from my on-premises data center, as well as workloads I have in Azure?
Yeah, pardon me, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to workload portability, we've had quite a range of support, but when it comes specifically from Amazon Azure, virtualization is one of the key ones straight away. We have a very robust cross-hypervisor restoration capability, so we can, on-premise VMware, Hyper-V, Nutanix, we can restore any sort of VM backup directly into Amazon, and the same thing from Azure. If we've got any Azure workloads up there, we can restore them again as Amazon instances. So from University of Canberra's point of view, for example, out of that backup set, there's an awful lot of virtualization sitting in there. There's a bunch of Nutanix VMs. Well, if they had a big DR event and ultimately they'd want to restore back to an on-premise data center, but if it's not available, they could actually restore into the cloud, and they could do that directly from the backups we've got sitting up there. So you could actually get your workloads up and running very, very quickly. And then also, of course, there's with all the database support, we've got out-of-place restore capability. So doing MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, those kind of things, you can be backing up, you can be restoring those into other destinations, whether it's on-prem or into another cloud provider. So we can certainly do all that. But yeah, it's a pretty big capability, and we could have a whole session on that.
Christian, anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I was really interested to see, I think, results of the first poll, because it showed that not only backup to the cloud from your on-premise workloads was really popular, but also data protection of in-cloud workloads, and that's, I think, the flexibility that Commvault provides is you can start in a hybrid situation, and potentially as your footprint grows in the cloud, you can still use the same technology to protect all of your workloads and maintain that trusted workflow.
Yeah, brilliant. And I know we have run over time, but we haven't lost anyone off the call. So one final question, I suppose, for you, Justin, because you've been the man of the moment. What's the hardest part of moving to the cloud? You're on mute. Sorry, Justin.
IT. It did come up on the screen. You are on mute. Yeah, I was just saying that the hardest part probably really wasn't a technology point of view. The technology stack there from Commvault and AWS was ready to go, and really easy looking back to implement. It was probably more of a management kind of point of view internally, like, I guess, getting the correct approvals from inside the organization. And that's probably more of a convincing people that the cloud is, one, cost effective, and the cloud is secure. So they're probably the biggest challenges, and they're probably the ones you kind of need to get sorted early on to make it a lot easier to transition to something like this. And they're fair questions from anyone. They're just, and as you can see here, they're questions that you can definitely answer, but you've just got to make sure you've got the right information to answer them.
Would you do anything differently? That's my question. Just throw it in there.
No, I don't I don't think so. I think it's turned out. The only thing I'd probably do differently, and Bruce might agree, is that maybe because we've obviously done a lot of learning along this journey, and throughout that learning, we've now what Bruce and me recently touched on before. We've re-architected a little bit how we've stored the data in the cloud versus short-term versus long-term, depending on the data type and the storage tier. But now that that's kind of a known quantity, other people don't have to learn from that. They can kind of just have those models in the cloud from the get-go. Because it's kind of now that we've, over the last few years, we've worked out all those kind of, not so much kinks, but because the way that we originally set it up worked no problem. It was more just streamlining it even further.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for attending. It's been a great insight from Justin into what he's done with him and his team at Canberra Uni. We thank you very much, Justin, for the insights and your cloud journey. Thanks also very much to Christian and Bruce for your IP and prowess on the questions. We do have a lot of questions unanswered. We will intend to come back with the answers to you on that. So don't feel free that we're just flogging them off, but yeah, we will get answers to your questions. So yeah, with that in mind, please bear in mind our next DataCon is around our business effectiveness with ransomware. So that's on May 21. Look for the invites that will come out or on Meetup. So thank you again for your time, and I wish you a good day.